I saw the movie for the second time this weekend. I had seen it at Toronto over a year ago. So it was interesting to see it again and look at it. And I didn't realize how much of it, or at least I didn't, I remembered more about the hearing loss and that part of the narrative. And this time I was picking up on more of the addiction narrative. It's really two, isn't it? It's not just one.
Yeah, there's a few. There's, I guess, from musician to silence, from an addict to recovery, and from hearing to deafness. There's a lot of kind of threads going on there, which is what kind of makes it, I think, such an interesting story, and was certainly really compelling script when I read it.
So I didn't realize either that Darius Marder had this long relationship with Derek Cianfrance, which actually makes a lot of sense. So you did some research into him and found out what his background was, yeah?
Not at the point of meeting him, no. I've really just read the script blind and loved it, met him, and then kind of came to realize that he'd written on Blue Valentine and Place Beyond the Pines, two films I really, really love. Again, both films that feel really steeped in a kind of authenticity, that are really kind of intentional in the way the stories are told, and structured, but steeped in something just very kind of intimate and honest. And I kind of sense the same kind of thing in this script. But to be honest, the kind of basis of our decision to work together, I think, came from a personal connection. I think we kind of are kindred spirits in many ways, in that we like to throw ourselves into life at the deep end and want to experience and learn lots of different things. So when he told me, look, crazy idea, but I'm thinking that the drumming would be real drumming, and same with the sign language. And I thought, that sounds great. Let's just try it.
But you're a rapper, so you have some musicianship to start with, right? You'd never played the drums?
No, I'd never played the drums. No, it's very different. I think having rhythm up here is different to putting it in your body, putting in all four limbs coordinated, different metronomes. I had a really patient drumming teacher in Guy Licata. That was an amazing, just an amazing teacher, really, an amazing guy. You spend 2-3 hours a day, every day with someone. You get to know them pretty well. They get to know you pretty well. And soon you're learning more from them than just about the drums. And I guess what I learned was you can't think your way to playing the drums. You have to kind of let the drums play you. You have to surrender to the rhythm that it's asking of you. And I felt that's a tremendous lesson for me as an actor, and also as a human being. I think of Irfan Khan, his famous quote that he passed on to his widow and his kids after we lost him this year, which was surrender to the dance of uncertainty. Like in a way, I think that's what kind of Guy was trying to teach me at the drums.
I love him so much. And
same, yeah.
I think that applies to the whole year we've been living through. Could be a helpful way to go. But you were also, actors say that too, that the best acting is to give yourself up to the moment. So it's...
Yeah. So it was, learning to play the drums, I think, really informed the performance, in the sense that, I had to play a real gig in front of a real audience at the start of the shoot. But it also really informed, I think, Ruben's physicality and the way he expresses himself and communicates non-verbally. He communicates mainly on the drums rather than verbally. As a character, which is very different to me. And so I think it informed that. But yeah, I think you're right in saying that it's also something that I've kind of carried forwards with me as an actor. And I think the same can be said of the American Sign Language. What Jeremy taught me early on was, look, there's a trope in deaf culture that hearing people are emotionally repressed. The reason for that is we hide behind words in the hearing community. And, I found this to be true insofar as when I started really expressing myself about things I cared about in ASL, I would get really emotional in a way that I wouldn't if I was speaking about them in English. I could just disconnect and just say the words. And he said, look, when you're communicating with your body, you're inhabiting what you're saying very differently. You have a different connection, a different relationship to what you're expressing. It is just more expressive. And in a way, Jeremy in the deaf community taught me the true meaning of the word communication, connected, embodied communication. And I think I took that with me into the role, into the performance, and I think beyond that, into life. So, the ASL and the drumming it was challenging, it was daunting, but it was very enriching, you know, for me as a person and for the performance. I'm very grateful for those teachers.
The person that you work with in the movie, who I was very moved by, was Paul Rocky. Is that
Paul Racy? Yeah.
I was amazed to find out that he's actually someone who learned English as a second language that he grew up with. Tell us about him.
Yeah, so almost all the characters, really, actors in the film who play culturally deaf characters are themselves culturally deaf. You know, Paul is a coder, a child of deaf adults, and as such, he is someone who's lived a life between the hearing and deaf worlds. And that is also Joe's character's done. Joe is a late deafened character, similar to Ruben. And so, whereas Joe makes the migration into the kind of deaf culture, Ruben is resisting that, and he exists in this kind of netherworld, which is why they have this point of connection. You know, Joe wasn't born deaf, and nor was Ruben. They're both late deafened. But it's a connection, of course, that Ruben is resisting because he's clinging on to his identity. But, you know, just to speak more about Paul, there are a lot of overlaps between his character and his life. That's not why he did an incredible job in this. It's because he's an incredible actor. And he'll say himself that,
moved me.
You know, he spent 35 years as a day player, you know, and just performing deaf theater and stuff and doing stuff that really he's passionate about. He says himself, you know, to be given a role like this at this point in his life and this point in his career it's just such a gift to the world. I can't wait for people to see him and see what he could do.
But I was fascinated by the AA of it all. And I wondered how much exposure you had to that before and whether you were, you know, threw yourself into it this time, because that was dead on. All of that stuff just felt right on the money, the way he interacted with you and the way you kept trying to buck authority and get away with something.
Yeah.
Do something on your own. And there was a kind of bravado and machismo that your character seemed to hang on to for dear life as he was so frightened underneath. And you managed to communicate all of that.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I mean, kind of recovery circles are very specific, and they're ones that Paul has some experience in guiding some kind of recovery communities within the deaf community as well. And they're also kind of circles that I've kind of had some indirect experience of. And in researching for this role, I kind of to experience them more directly and kind of try to explore what those circles are about and spend time in those circles and spend time, you know, attending meetings, you know, very as regularly as I could. And I kind of feel like everyone would benefit from them. You know, everyone would benefit from them because, you know, addiction manifests itself in so many different ways. And for Ruben, he'd kind of replaced his drug use for his obsessively structured kind of workaholism and his codependency with Lou, his girlfriend. And I could really relate to this idea of being a workaholic, quite frankly. You know, addiction often is basically about not being able to face the void. It's about running to something else because you're running from yourself. And I really, in attending some of these circles, I really realized, I think I've got a problem here, you know, with the way I approach my work, for real. And facing the void is something that can be really challenging. But in this pandemic, it's something that a lot of us are being forced to do. And I hope we're all in this kind of collective recovery. I hope we come out of it, you know, a bit better off emotionally.
Absolutely. But sometimes being successful as an actor, as you've been, it involves a kind of obsessive achievement. You know, it's hard to draw the line, you know, if you're going to throw yourself into making a character like this come alive, even in only 2 takes. I understand you shot on film and that you had limited ability to shoot.
We did. Darius teases me about this because I'm convinced he gave us 2 takes on most setups. And he's like, no, we went to 3 sometimes. I'm like, okay, that's academic, dude. Like, but you know, that was Darius. That was actually a lot of what Darius did in this film was audacious. One was throwing down the gauntlet of, you know, if you want to learn sign language and learn to play the drums for real. Another one was deciding to shoot on film because it focuses the mind in a different way. You don't get to go, let me try it out this way and that way and warm up. You're just there and you can't think, and we've got to move on. So it kind of made us focus in a different way. And also I think the way he designed the sound in this film was really, really audacious. And I think it's to his credit in time and time again, he took risks that would make his life more difficult, but would make the film more special. And when you have a leader like that, it really kind of galvanizes everyone to kind of put themselves out there.
I was curious to know how you were, how they communicated to you what your character could and couldn't hear, and how you learned what his experience actually was. And if you ever had any questions about playing the role as someone who can hear.
You know, Ruben is someone who exists in a no man's land between the hearing world and the deaf world. As such, you know, as he starts off as a hearing character, it's the kind of role that only a hearing actor could play. But since he's a character who starts to dip his toe into and at some point immerse himself into the deaf culture, I thought the most important thing was for me to kind of learn about deaf culture, immerse myself in deaf culture, to form genuine friendships within the deaf community, as I did with Jeremy, you know, and to really spend 7 months just kind of being my life. That was my social contact, you know, just hanging out with Jeremy, hanging out with his friends, and signing to a point of fluency. And I felt like learning and understanding about deaf culture, understanding how erroneous this idea is of deafness as a disability, that deafness is another way of being, another way of living. You know, with regards to the technical aspects of hearing loss and experiencing it, you know, we had these kind of inverted, these auditory blockers that I'd place in my ear canal, and we turn on a white noise setting, so I couldn't even hear myself speak, and it was quite hard to get out once they were in, so they'd be in really for the whole day. And then communicate with Darius, you know, through writing and stuff on set. And I use those for the parts of the film where Ruben is in denial about his nascent deaf identity. When he's thinking of deafness as a loss or a lack, I had this deafening white noise everywhere. But in those moments in the film when he's starting to understand deafness is a culture, that it's something that's enriching, it's an invitation to new connections with new people in new ways. It's not a loss, it's not a lack. Then I didn't use those auditory blockers, and it was moot by then anyway, because in those points of the film I was just communicating in sign language both on and off camera on set.
I loved the scenes where you're first going to that deaf community and you're having dinner with them. And I love that whole sequence where it shows the transition between you're being isolated and alone and unable to communicate, and they're just going on and doing their thing. They're having a wonderful time. Mm-hmm. And finally break through the children, really. That's my impression. The kids.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting, that dining table scene is one that so many deaf people have come and said, thank you for that scene. Like, people don't capture the nuances of our authentic lives in that way. And a lot of people don't realize that dinner at the deaf dinner table is often very loud, because people need to bang on the tables to get each other's attention, to pass things over, to get people. That's how you communicate. So, you know, understanding, like, there's your idea of what it is, and then it's what it really is. And I hope, you know, deaf culture is many things, but I hope that this film gives people a glimpse into how rich and diverse it is, and it can be.
Yeah, I was struck by the fact that he actually come through this whole experience and you come out very conversant, but then you go to the colloquial implants. And what did they do to tell you what you could hear then? How did you have a different setting or some other way of hearing what he could hear, creating that noise?
Because cochlear implants and the auditory process behind cochlear implants is one that's digitally kind of produced. It's not real hearing in the sense of hearing going through ear canals and your nervous system into your brain. It's kind of a digitized kind of reproduction of sound. That's something that is kind of available. You can listen to that on YouTube, or you can go to an audiologist and they can play to you through earphones what that hearing sounds like. Gotcha. And so that was more about me kind of getting to grips with what it sounded like and understanding that and sitting with that, and just playing that to myself a lot. And then and then kind of just trying to be on set and just, you know, the imprint of that, allowing that to inform the interactions a little bit.
What were some of the other things that they did with the sound that was unusual?
Yeah, great question. I mean, Nicola Becker, our sound designer, is an amazing, amazing sound designer. She's done some really, really amazing films. And they started the sound design process 2 years before they started shooting, because it's so instrumental in creating this first-person experience and this subjective experience of going on this journey with Ruben. And what they did was, usually at the end of a scene, the sound recordist comes in with a boom and says, let's do a wild track, let's say the lines again in case an airplane went past and we've got clean recordings of the dialogue. With this, he'd come up to me with this kind of weird hexagonal steampunk contraption that he'd made at his laboratory, but maybe it was from his lavatory, who knows? It looked like something you could fish out of a sewer.
It sounds
like an undetonated World War II mine or something. And he'd kind of put it against your chest and say, breathe. And now swallow. And now hold your breath so I can hear your heartbeat. Now blink. Lick the inside of your teeth with your lips. Lick your lips. Swallow again. And they built the audioscape of this film, the soundscape, from those recordings. So it's a authentically subjective experience of what Ruben is hearing. Because when you lose your external hearing, sometimes your vibrational hearing kind of goes up in the mix. You hear more of your internal bodily processes, which you're sensing through vibration. You hear so much through your body, not just through your ears. So that was part of how they pieced it together, and they spent 6 months in the sound mix.
So the great scene is between you and Olivia Cooke, and it's the scene where you are at your most desperate, when you are about to lose your anchor. It's the scene where she's going away in a taxi, and you guys had to do a lot in there, and I have to say you did it, but it must have been a challenge.
Yeah, again, I think it's just that thing of like knowing we got 2 takes means you just go all in, you just go in swinging, honestly, and it's kind of like a high wire act that focuses the mind a little bit, and all working with Olivia is like just a godsend. She's just the most generous, present, committed actor. It was just like working with Paul Racy, working with Olivia, working with Chelsea Lee, working with Lauren Ridloff. I was just kind of it's just such a dream to be surrounded by people who are so present and, as I said, committed and generous. They're just throwing you these waves that you have to ride. You don't have to make any yourself.
What is ableism? Describe what ableism is. That's part of what
I'm not really an expert on that topic, I think, but maybe I guess it'll be, but disabled kind of people might be best to kind of like explain exactly what ableism is. But my limited understanding of ableism is kind of discriminating against disabled people, or kind of skewing things in favor of able-bodied people. Again, in my limited knowledge, I would say that we live in a very much an ableist world, maybe where a lot of things aren't as accessible to differently abled people.
But it's also about it, isn't it? Sort of your character has trouble understanding how he can function if he isn't good for other people, if he isn't productive for other people, that he wants.
Yeah, right. I guess, I think of that less as to do with his with disability or his kind of denigration of disability. I think of it more as being about Ruben's intense codependency with Lou. He's in this relationship, and he thinks that relationship is premised and founded on their musical and creative collaboration. And if he loses his hearing, he loses music, he loses Lou, he's lost his identity. And as I was saying, I think in this pandemic, a lot of people have lost the thing that gives them daily purpose and meaning, and facing the void in that way can be really like really, really scary. So I think it's more of a kind of like deeper identity-based anxiety and panic in him that's triggered, rather than a kind of a view about what deaf people are like and how he doesn't want to be them. it's not like I don't want to be you. It's like, I want to be who I thought I was this whole time. I want to hold on to that.
Well, you have several identities as an actor. You've been in the Star Wars universe with Rogue One. You've done Jason Bourne. You know, I loved what you did with The Night Of, by the way.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks.
Brilliant. Really great. And I actually saw Road to Guantanamo.
Well, that was my first ever job.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, that was a great movie too. I wrote about it.
Thank you. I was lucky to be a part of all of these projects, honestly.
And The Sisters Brothers must have been a trip.
It was, yeah. I'm a huge admirer of John C. Reilly's and Joaquin's, and of course being reunited with Jake, who really kind of helped give me a break in the States with Nightcrawler, which he was a producer on. And Jacques Audiard, who I think is just, you know, one of our living masters, truly. It was always a dream of mine to work with him. You know, it's tricky because the idea of working with people is exciting. Then when the film is out there in the world and people connect with it, that's nice. But often the process of making the film is one where I just can't see the wood for the trees. You're just always kind of trying to keep your head above water and not sink and find a way forwards, you know? I feel like I learned a lot on that film. I feel like I learned a lot about what I was doing as an actor up to that point. And I think that was a turning point for me actually as an actor, and in realizing actually I want to do something a little bit different. I want to make work differently. I want to create from a different place. I think even up to the point of Sisters Brothers, I felt like I was often and internalized this idea that people wanted me to come in and kind of play these characters for them, if that makes sense. You know, I'd kind of become quite proficient in molding and making these masks, you know, and wearing them. And I think after Sisters Brothers, I thought, actually, I want to take masks off now and bring more of myself to my work, in a nutshell. And I think Sound of Metal was exactly what I was looking for in that. And I said, yeah, here's something I'm just going to bring all of myself to, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to leave this part of myself at the door because I think that what they want from me on this project is this kind of thing or this kind of character. Just not going to pay attention to that and just paint with all my colors. So Sisters Brothers is an interesting thing in my mind, because as much as it was like the pinnacle of working with all these people I dreamed of working with for so long, I felt like I really realized the limitations of my approach up until that point, and it was a turning point for me.
I can see that, and I can see that this would be a different direction. What about Mogul Mowgli? That's your other film that's out right now.
Yeah, it's not out in the States yet. It's out in the UK. Yeah, I guess I think similarly, it's something that was strangely something I was developing before even come to Sound of Metal, but on paper, at least, they have quite similar arcs. They're both about obsessive artists who are, you know, struck down by a health crisis and in this kind of purgatory, forced to reconsider what really matters and who they really are. Which, you know, may sound very specific, but again, I think that's something that everyone's experiencing pretty much in this pandemic. So I hope people can relate to it on that level. But beyond their description in kind of blurb format, I think they're very distinctively different films. Bassam Tariq, just like Darius Marder, is a very distinctive cinematic voice with his own approach and his own take. What we tried to do with Mogul Mowgli is really draw on our own experiences, mine and Bassam's and people close to us, to try and create our own cinematic language, if that doesn't sound too, you know, pretentious or too ambitious, in that we felt that often stories of people like us, you know, South Asians, Muslims in diaspora, third culture kids, would still be framed within the lens of, well, either two ways, either in a kind of anthropological social realism, you know, oh, look at how these people live and isn't it scary and weird, and or a kind of comedy, you know, a kind of toothless kind of like entertainment. And we were really interested in kind of trying to find a language that reflected the culture it was talking about. And that meant embracing magical realism, embracing a view on the world where mythology and mysticism and prayer and God is real.
And you have there's some conversations around you're actually playing Hamlet. Is that still happening?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, with this Corona world, everything's on pause, but it's a project that I've been developing for many years. It's just a play that I've always loved. And I've always felt that a lot of those canonical English language stories are most urgently brought to life within kind of immigrant communities. If you look at things like, you know, the duty to father, and revenge and reincarnation of ghosts, and Ophelia being forbidden to be marrying outside of her caste. It's stuff that's really real in Wembley in 2020. And actually, we can kind of keep these stories alive if people let us. And so we've got, Shakespeare is all that I studied. I went to drama school for 1 year and I just studied Shakespeare. That was the only drama school training I had. And so, I'm hoping that we'll shoot that film in the not too distant future.
And is there anything else coming up for you as well?
I've got some music that I released this year. There's an album called The Long Goodbye. It's an album, it's a breakup album, and it's about feeling like you're being dumped by the country that you live in, the country that you love. And I think it's something a lot of people can relate to, from India to America to, the Ukraine to the UK right now. So it's this kind of follows these 7 stages of grief, really, of this breakup that I'm going through with Brittany, or Britannia. Despite all I've done for her, despite all we've been through together, now she wants me out. To me, it feels like the other global pandemic we're all facing is this rising xenophobia and intolerance. So there was that, and so I put that out this year, and just as a kind of postscript to that, I just released a spoken word piece about some family members that I lost during the pandemic, called "I Miss You," and it's I guess it touches on a similar thing that Sound of Metal touches on, in that sometimes you lose things that matter to you, but they might also be an invitation to a new way forwards. And I hope we come out of 2020 thinking of some new ways we can all function as a society.
Amen to that. And I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you for talking to us.
Thanks, Anne. Really appreciate it.
Meeting you. I hope I get to meet you in person.
Yeah, same.
All these projects that you have coming up. All right. Thank you.
Take care. See ya.